Lexical cohesion really comes in two forms. First, we get these tiebacks, these references to previously mentioned nouns. Take a look at some examples from student writing. Here the writer mentions a particular adaptation and then ties back to it. Adaptations like this. Here a writer talks about something that people like across the globe and then ties back to it, this universal appreciation. We get a mention of some qualities and then a tie back. Or we get a mention of a well-made hand axe and then a link back to it. Such a tool. Take a look at what happens when these references are lacking or misused. Here's some examples from student writing. You can see the little notes I've put for students. Lexico, meaning you can think about lexical cohesion here. Take a look at what a tough read this is. For thousands of years, humans wondered the earth evolving and adapting to their surroundings. Evolution is the process by which species undergo morphological and physical changes. But if you were to just make a connection here, this would read a lot more simply. For example, what about this? This is evolution, comma, the process. Doesn't that read better now? Take a look at another example. There's a study where women made mating choices. Women made mating choices. Well, are we talking about the same choices or different choices? It's hard to know, right? Well, but if you think through, if you're familiar with the subject matter, you know that this writer's talking about the same choices. But we can signal that to readers. Same women, same choices, right? Now take a look at when the references are unclear, misleading. In evolutionary psychology, they argue. Well, who are they? I mean, I've seen this video, so I can guess, right? But a real-world reader who isn't familiar with your subject matter and is thus reading your work so they can learn about it will be confused by this, We can signal who this is. The scientists, Jeffrey Miller. Here's another example. The t-shirt experiment was a study on a group of women who smelled t-shirts in which men had slept. They, well, who are they? The men or the women? We can clarify this for readers. The other form of lexical cohesion we will see are noun phrases or adverbs that connect two ideas. Here we're not tying back so much as building a bridge and showing the relationship between one idea and the next as we do. So, take a look, for instance. Here the writer speaking, somewhat generally. There are some things that we universally like or don't. And then we get an example, sweets and fats. Here's another signal that does the same thing. Adaptations that we've evolved, like thumbs, right? These are simple signals, but you'd be surprised how often writers forget to give them and how much they can help readers. Here we are narrowing down, right? Blonde bombshells, we got a particular feature of them, their waists. Here we have a contrast, right? You think you have the idea of choice, but you might not. And then here, we're building an argument. In particular, this writer seems to be complaining about Kanazawa. He's got some concerns about him. And we've laid out a couple concerns. And now we're about to introduce the third one. We're building towards a conclusion. Okay, well, look what happens when the phrases are missing. You get a tough read again. Even though men know women's beauty might be fake, they still fall for it. The Savannah principle claims that the human brain has difficulty processing and understanding conditions that did not occur in the ancestral environment. It's very hard to see why these two sentences are next to each other, especially if you're unfamiliar with the subject matter. This is just hard reading. But actually, these sentences do belong together. The writer had a reason for putting them together. The writer's just not showing that reason to us. Well, there might be a cause-effect relationship here, right? This is because of the Savannah principle, which, okay, now it makes sense, right? Because we've signaled the relationship between the ideas. Now here's another example of that, all right? Talking about the Malaysian golden ratio study here. Well, what's this sentence at the end here to do? It seems like the writer is kind of summing it all up, right? But we can signal that with something like essentially, right? Or in sum. Or, maybe we're just trying to show what the takeaway is from this. Whatever it is that the writer's trying to do, he or she can communicate that. What's particularly difficult for readers is when there's a signal word, but it introduces it doesn't really signal the relationship that the reader sees. This creates real cognitive dissonance here. Take a look at this one here. Beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, and you can see my note here to the student, and that, look at this next idea. People are trying to understand what makes something beautiful. Is there really a contrast here? I mean, to me, I see like a cause-effect thing, right? Because there's so much variety, we want to understand it. Here's another example. The things we like, what's not a coincidence? It's not, that's not like it's not really a contrasting idea. That's the same, we're really kind of building on it. We're kind of validating the proposition. What about in fact? All right. Here's another. Dutton proposes that beauty is a way of arousing interest to make the best possible decisions. He also talks about hand axes. Well, yeah, he talks about this, and he talks about that, but it's a more nuanced relationship. Really, this isn't a new idea so much as an example of the previous one, right? So what about something like, for instance, he discusses, all right? That will help readers see what this whole hand axe thing is about and why it's coming up after this whole thing here. Let's now take a look at some other examples in student writing and see if we can identify the relationships between them.